Feel Good TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. U.S. prepares to attack Venezuela. This is a World War III alert, but it's a trap. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. The attacks could start at any moment now, any day now. This is very dangerous. Let's get into the content. Salute.
We have 6 airlines, major airlines, canceling flights to Venezuela over the weekend. And they're saying that from here on out, the U.S. aviation is warning everyone that there's a heightened military security alert for this whole region. A NOTAM put up for many of these different spots because of the major buildup of American forces. Usually when this happens, the next step is they start striking. So whenever they close down airspace completely and you see all these airlines making this move, it's indicative of something major happening. Also, believe it or not, we watched the spike in the pizza activity in Washington, them ordering pizzas and all this. This goes hand in hand with them getting together in a big meeting, getting ready to launch something, meaning that they were getting together looking at what they could do for these strikes. Trump has been presented a whole plethora of new options here, and it looks like they're really about to commence this whole thing here. So the U.S. was talking to Maduro, it seems, in this new phase of operations. They were willing to give him a chance. He put out this really cheesy video of him dancing around saying, peace, no war. But the options on the table right now include overthrowing Maduro. There's been talk of him leaving the country to go to somewhere else for the rest of his days, where he would basically go into hiding, or another country would protect him, like Colombia or Russia or China, something like that. If it's Colombia or one of the neighbors right next door, the U.S., with all the guns in the area, they could turn their guns right toward Colombia next. I almost feel like that's going to be the move, because Trump's done put his target on the leader of Colombia and saying that they're the #1 cocaine trafficker in the world. If they're down here trying to take out narco people, how are they not going to go after that guy? So I think that this is going to expand largely, and it's going to come all the way up to our doorstep. They're already talking about strikes in Mexico. They could start doing these things hand in hand, back and forth. This all becomes a war zone here in any moment. I mean, it already is, but for all the people that have been sleeping on it, this place is about to come alive with war from Venezuela to our southern border. I hope people are ready for the blowback, because they surely will target places in America and events will happen. But that is some of the latest here. I'll leave links. Join me for the live stream.
See, we gotta be real careful, because they got their sleeper cells. The CIA gonna use the Tren de la Agua Venezuela gang bullshit. Yeah, they work for the U.S. government. They not above having them kill some innocent Americans, terrorists, and say attacking our people in Venezuela, knowing they don't give a shit about no Venezuelans. So this is some very dangerous times we in. That's where we got to go live and look into this.
Assets or infrastructure inside Venezuela?
It allows us to do that, but we haven't said we're going to do that. And we may be having some discussions with Maduro.
Is there anything you're ready to rule out at this point? Are you ruling out U.S. troops on the ground?
No, I don't rule out that. I don't rule out anything.
President Donald Trump has moved the United States even closer to a potential hot war with Venezuela by designating Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, the leader of a foreign terrorist organization. Now, Maduro's allies are also now classified as terrorists, giving the Trump administration a little more authority to go after Maduro militarily. Now, before we get to the details, including how exactly the American people feel about a potential regime change war in Venezuela, and hint, it's not good. Cenk, your 2 cents?
Yeah, what are we, nuts? What are we going to a war with Venezuela for? So This violates every promise Donald Trump made. I want you guys to see how far along we are on the war path and come back and discuss how's it going to affect them politically here at home.
Now, the alleged terrorist designation was given specifically to what is referred to as.
The U.S. was saying big nations don't pick on little nations when they were saying Russia shouldn't fight Ukraine. But now they're trying to bully Venezuela, which Ukraine had one of the largest militaries in Europe, more advanced weapons than any other European country because we gave them all their weapons. We're trying to bully Venezuela. See, and where is the congressional black shoe shiners denouncing this, saying, hell no, we want to have this type of terrorism? That's because they part of the problem. They ain't finna say nothing about war. They love war.
As Cartel de los Soles. And if you're wondering, what is that cartel? I haven't really heard much about it. It's because it's not an actual specific cartel. In fact, it's a phrase that experts say is more a description of allegedly corrupt government officials than an organized crime group. In other words, Venezuelans use the phrase to refer to all forms of corruption within the government. It's not an actual drug cartel. And as we know, what's happening right now between the United States and Venezuela is not over narco terrorists. It's not about drug trafficking. If you're actually concerned about the drug overdose deaths that are obviously destroying lives and families in this country, it has to do with fentanyl. Fentanyl does not come from Venezuela. It comes from China and it's funneled to the United States through Mexico. Now, Venezuelans began using this term back in the 90s to refer to high-ranking military officers who had grown rich through drug running. But as corruption expanded in the country, basically it started to be used as a way of referring to all sorts of government officials and all sorts of public servants like police officers and the like as corrupt, right? So that's what it's really about. Now, as the State Department tries to classify this loose network of corrupt politicians as a literal cartel, they claim that Cartel de los Soles, by and with other designated foreign terrorist organizations, including Tren de Aragua and Sinaloa Cartel, are responsible for terrorist violence throughout our hemisphere, as well as for trafficking drugs into the United States and Europe. Again, just to repeat myself for the billionth time, Venezuela is not a major player in trafficking drugs into the United States. However, they are known for smuggling drugs, particularly cocaine, into Europe. I would venture to say Trump is not all that concerned about that, but he is interested in a cover story to justify a potential hot war between the United States and Venezuela in an effort to overthrow Nicolas Maduro. I've got more details, but Cenk is chomping at the bit, so go ahead, Cenk.
So real quick, I just want to give you a sense of the absurdity of this. So it's like saying that money in politics in America is a cartel, or the establishment is a cartel. Okay, look, you're gonna get some sympathy from me. They do act like gangsters. But really, if we called the establishment terrorists, what would that mean? Who's in the establishment and what do we do with that? So you can see how absurd this thing is and how desperate they are to come up with a fake excuse for going to war when we all already know this is largely about oil and Marco Rubio's personal beef with Venezuela.
I don't even think it's about oil, Cenk, because look, Maduro made abundantly clear to Trump, this is weeks and weeks ago, I will give you whatever you want. You want access to the oil? I'll give you access to the oil. I just don't want to go to war. And Trump's like, yeah, I know he said that. I don't care.
So so you're saying since oil lobby has been removed from the equation,
yes,
because they'll get what they want, all that's remaining is Marco Rubio hating Cuba and hence hating Venezuela, plus the military-industrial complex always gets rich from war.
Very likely.
So those are the two main factors left. But what is not a factor is a made-up cartel called the corruption in Venezuela.
Exactly. And by the way, I should note that up until last year, the label of foreign terrorist organization had been reserved for actual foreign terrorist organizations like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, who apparently now are totally fine with the United States, and in fact will get invites to the White House, as we learned with a former Al-Qaeda terrorist who's now the leader of Syria. I'm supposed to pretend like all those terrorist acts that he engaged in, including against our own soldiers and military in Iraq, never happened. Okay, sure, as long as Israel's happy. But anyway, and by the way, there is currently a militant group in Gaza, okay, that's led by a guy by the name of Abu Shabab, who has ties to ISIS, that Israel with the permission of the United States, is currently arming. Why are we arming someone who has ties to ISIS?
Yeah, what about al-Shabaab? He's still, you think he's gone?
Abu Shabaab.
Abu Shabaab.
Al-Shabaab is a separate terrorist organization.
Okay, yeah. You think Shabaab is gone? No, he's still here.
Say no to Shabaab, yes to kebabs, okay? That's the way to go.
So guys,
American way.
Again, more details in a sec. But as you're seeing here, what's new about this story or about these type of stories is now it's being revealed, right? Before mainstream media would just go along with this and be like, oh, Venezuela has terrible problems with the cartels and maybe weapons of mass destruction or whatever, etc. And they would just lie us into war wholesale. But now the truth is coming out in 1,000 different directions, left, right, and center. And so it's much harder for them to lie us into wars. So what they'll have to do instead, if they choose to go down this path, is just go, oh, we don't care. We're just gonna go to war, even though we said we were anti-war, and even though we obviously have no justification at all.
Now look, in defense of your point about oil, there was an easy way to obtain the oil, which is, okay, make a deal with Maduro diplomatically. Maduro's willing to give the whole pie away. But why would you do that when you can make the defense contractors rich, risk the lives of our soldiers, and attempt to oust Maduro and then obtain the oil?
You know what TYT's always been about? Taking on the corrupt, greedy establishment. For us, it's the corporate media. We've been fighting that fight for over 20 years. For the cell phone industry, it's the same story. A handful of massive corporations ripping you off. That's why we're partnering with Noble Mobile. They're the only wireless company with the same mission as ours, to fight back. Their No Bull plan offers unlimited data for just $50 a month. But here's the best part. For any data you don't use, you get cash back. Real money you can spend however you want. Stop letting your unused data pad the pockets of billionaires. With Noble, you take control over your data. And by switching to Noble, you're directly supporting TYT.
And with the rest of the American people, this is not about narco traffickers. Trump didn't care about drug overdose deaths in America in his first term. Biden didn't care about drug overdose deaths in America during his one and only term. And there's no way in hell Trump gives a damn in his second term. That's the reality of the situation. If one thing should be abundantly clear to the American people right now, especially with the backdrop of everything that's been going on with Israel, it's that our government, regardless of whether it's run by a Democrat or Republican, doesn't give a damn about you. They never do anything for you. What they're doing is in order to line the pockets of their lobbyists, of their donors, of themselves. That's all this is. It's like a looting competition.
Yeah, another thing that I love is now with our members, I can't tell who's on the left and who's independent or lean right. Mattman63 on YouTube wrote in, give us your tired, you're hungry, your oil rights. Okay, that is our new slogan. But really, at this point, that kind of criticism can come from the right or the left, because the right doesn't want to go to war for ExxonMobil either.
What happened to energy independence, Cenk? What happened to energy independence? Oh, we're gonna drill, baby, drill. And America's gonna be energy independent. No more wars. We don't need to go to wars. We have all the oil we need. What happened?
And in fact, we are #1 in producing oil and energy in the world, and we are under Trump. So there's absolutely no need for this, because as you all now are beginning to realize, now the veil of mainstream media is beginning to end, is that we don't ever go to war for the American people. We go to war for different donor classes, oil, military industrial complex, Israel, different sets of lobbies force Americans to go and die in wars, and certainly to pay for all those wars.
Now, as has been reported, the military buildup off the coast of Venezuela has been significant. So in addition to strikes on boats that have killed dozens of people extrajudicially, the US military has amassed more than a dozen warships and 15,000 troops into the region as part of what the Pentagon has branded Operation Southern Spear. Trump has been briefed by top officials on a range of options for action inside Venezuela, including strikes on military or government facilities and special operations raids. The White House also proposed that US military planes drop leaflets over Caracas in a psychological operation designed to further pressure Maduro to step down, time possibly to Sunday to coincide with his birthday. And that's according to what the Washington Post is reporting. Now, how do Americans feel about this? Well, looks like a lot of people voted for Trump because they believed him when he said that he wouldn't start any new wars. And now that it looks like he is poised to start a new war, they're not so happy about it. Let's look at some of the polling here. A new CBS News poll found that 70% of Americans oppose military action against Venezuela. Only 30% would be in favor.
And that number
And
is
that's CBS
preposterous.
News.
Why would 30% be in favor? The only reason is that 30% watches media that tells them, dangerous terrorists, we're bringing in fentanyl who's gonna kill your grandmothers, being brought in by Venezuela, kill all the terrorists. Come on, guys, is it Melania who says be better or be best?
Be best.
Yeah,
right,
okay, be way, way better than this. Best is a stretch.
So most Americans do not see Venezuela as a threat to national security. They don't even see Venezuela as an enemy, right? So let's take a look at this. Only 13% see Venezuela as a major threat. 48% say minor threat, and 39% say not a threat at all. Then you move on to the next data point here. The poll also found that 86% of independents and 64% of Republicans say Trump needs to actually explain his policy regarding Venezuela. So big ups to the American people. It looks like across the board, they're not really buying what Trump is selling here. They want a better explanation. And again, they're just not believing what Trump is saying because the story, by the way, changes depending on which day it is. And it just doesn't really make any sense. The math isn't mathing when it comes to Trump and the claims that he's making about Venezuela and the threat that they pose to the United States. Now, some Republicans are even trying to warn Trump that the American people are not interested in a regime change war in Venezuela. Senator Rand Paul happens to be one of them, and he argued just yesterday that military action against Venezuela would fracture the Republican base even more than it's already fractured. Take a look at that.
But I think once there's an invasion of Venezuela, or if they decide to re-up the subsidies and the gifts to Ukraine, I think you'll see a splintering and a fracturing of the movement that has supported the president, because I think a lot of people, including myself, were attracted to the president because of his reticence to get us involved in foreign war.
He also accused the Trump administration of pretending as if we are at war to do what they want. When you have war, the rules of engagement are lessened. I don't think there are any rules at all at this point. I don't believe in rules because none of the rules are followed. None of them are valued, especially when it comes to alleged international law. Even when it comes to rules of engagement that the United States purports to believe in, all of it is fake. All of it is made up. That's just the reality of the situation. I think the last 2 years makes that abundantly clear. I think the last decade, 2 decades has made that abundantly clear.
Yeah, so let's talk about the political consequences, which is Rand Paul's alluding to. In the old days, if you said, hey, we're going to likely going to go to war over a confluence of donor interests. So for example, look at the places where we threaten war: Iraq, Venezuela, and Iran. So we've already done Iraq. We threatened, we already bombed Iran, and we bombed boats off Venezuela, threatening more. And the places that are also dangerous and terrible that we do not threaten war against, like North Korea or even Syria. There'll be a little bit of bombing to help Israel, but not a full-scale invasion of Syria.
Yeah, we just armed terrorist groups. Yeah, that's all we did.
So right,
yeah.
But we're not threatening boots on the ground in Syria, et cetera. So when you look at that, what you see is crystal clear, okay? Which is, if you have a lot of oil, well, ding, 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 we've got, like in the slot machine, 777, war, because then you got the oil interests, oftentimes the Israeli interests. Believe it or not, here Israel's also implicated, talking about how Venezuela is helping with the Hezbollah. I don't know if that's made up and just to rile up the Israeli lobby, like, oh, you better, or this driven by the Israeli lobby. I don't know, but somehow they got involved in this, right? And then you got the military-industrial complex. So when all three line up, we're going to war. So now when I used to say that in the past, the mainstream media would say, oh, conspiratorial nonsense. Lunatics think that we go to war over oil and defense contractors. And Israeli interests, oh, ridiculous. Now it's completely flipped. If you're a schmuck who goes around going, no, I bet oil is not relevant in this equation, people think you're kind of an idiot, super naive at best. But who really thinks, oh, no, it could have been Paraguay or Venezuela, It's just random that Venezuela happens to have the largest oil reserve in the world. Come on. You really got to be super low IQ or a mainstream media reporter to believe that. So now, how's it going to play out for him? Well, look, on the one hand, I look at these Trump voters, the Republicans, and 36% say, no, that's okay. Trump doesn't have to explain anything. If Trump says it, I say Trump, okay? Ooh. On the other hand, holy cow, 64% of Trump voters go, no, he's gonna have to explain this because I don't know what this is and I don't think I like it, okay? If he's at a point where he might lose 2/3 of his own voters, let alone 86% of independents, right? That means this is not a winning political issue. It's a massive loser as a political issue. So now Trump usually gets his way out of that by just bullying everyone. Oh yeah, Rand Paul's a tiny little guy. I hate him, he's stupid. He's a rhino. The Republicans love war. Oops. Now, buddy, that's not what you were saying earlier, brother, right? And so Marjorie Taylor Greene's a traitor. Yes, we do everything Israel asks us. Otherwise, you're a rhino. Nah, that stuff's not flying anymore, right? And here you see it in the numbers crystal clear. So if they go and do this incredibly dumb war for no damn reason at all, other than to make their donors rich, what's going to happen is a massive backlash. I mean, the minute that thing gets messy, I mean, maybe they get in and out somehow, whatever, right? They did like they did with Iran. Oh, don't worry about it. It's a mini war. It's a 12-day war, right? But if it gets messy in the least bit, then Rand Paul's gonna win that debate within the Republican Party, let alone independents, let alone Democrats.
Good,
So
I hope he does.
Yeah, this is gonna be an epic disaster for Trump. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.
On Tuesday, Trump greenlights the CIA running covert operations in Venezuela. On Thursday, a Venezuelan oil plant randomly explodes. Yes, Trump on Tuesday greenlighted covert CIA operations in Venezuela. And I'm not even sure how that's legal, but yeah, that's what he did. Of course, he's hiding behind the excuse that this is still all about keeping drug trafficking in check, making sure that drugs don't get across the border of the US, even though he swears on his dead KKK grandfather's grave that the borders are closed and secure. Maduro actually opened up back channels with the US and said that they could actually negotiate, and the only stipulation is the United States can't conduct any operations in Venezuela or it's going to kill all political negotiations. And then boom, by I'm sure what is a mere coincidence, an oil plant in Venezuela was bombed. Oh, excuse me, there was an explosion. Oh, but the explosion didn't just happen at any oil facility. It was at Petrocindeño, one of the largest oil upgrade facilities in Venezuela, and of course, a facility that is absolutely crucial to Venezuela's economy. But wait, there's more. See, many people might have forgot, but Venezuela and Russia actually struck an oil deal with each other some years ago. And within the last 24 hours, a 15-year extension was reached between Venezuela and the Russia-linked oil venture, with the assumption that this deal was already in the making before the deal was struck and before the plant had an explosion. And what I'm sure is just another coincidence, recently in 2025, Russia and Venezuela signed another agreement to cooperate and commence projects specifically in Petrocindeño, with the specific goal of overcoming the sanctions through investments and through Russian operations in the facility. But yeah, after all the information I just told you, we're supposed to believe that Maria Machado is calling for the US to invade Venezuela and that Trump is bombing fishing boats. because of drug traffickers. Just out of curiosity, how does a covert CIA operation leading to the explosion of a vital oil facility in Venezuela stop drug trafficking in the US? Hint, hint. It doesn't. Yeah, sure, everybody. Nicolas Maduro is really actually a narco terrorist, just like Claudia Sheinbaum is actually really a narco terrorist. And that's why there are conservative Mexicans calling for them to invade Mexico, just like there are supposedly way more Christians than Muslims being killed in Nigeria. And that's why Trump wants to invade Nigeria. Yes, all of that explains why the CIA is potentially bombing oil facilities in Venezuela, shaking hands with Jolani, a literal Al-Qaeda terrorist, the current dictator of Syria, and former Al-Qaeda, who, was known for massacring Christians in large numbers. And despite claiming that he wants to get involved in Mexico and has been bombing boats in Venezuela because he wants to combat drug trafficking, he decided to partner up with Noboa of Ecuador to deal with that problem. The same Noboa who was quite literally the motherfucking plug. I mean, the plug of Latin America, caught shipping cocaine in boxes from his shipping company. So are we just gonna keep letting Trump play in our face like this? Are y'all really gonna keep pretending this is about drug trafficking? Are y'all gonna keep pretending Trump actually cares about Christians? Are y'all gonna keep pretending that the US government is altruistic in any way whatsoever in any of this is about anything other than stealing people's resources or securing the resources that we already have in countries that we've already conquered? Because it's grand larceny on an international scale, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
President Donald Trump's plan to get away with an attack on Venezuela has hit the rock as the South American country carried out swift retaliation hours after the assault on the Petrocedeno oil upgrading plant in eastern Venezuela. The blaze came after an explosion shook the facility. And with an explosion of that scale, it is almost impossible not to suspect that the CIA may have planted devices in the vicinity to take the facility out of service and further devastate the already bastardized economy of the country. The oil plant the CIA allegedly chose is telling, because the Petrocedeno plant is the beating heart of Venezuela's oil economy. Let me explain. Nestled deep within the industrial sprawl of Jose in eastern Venezuela, the Petrocedeno upgrader stands as a colossal alchemist in the core of the Orinoco belt, transforming the region's tar-like extra-heavy crude, some of the world's largest reserves, into lighter marketable syncrude that sells for far higher prices on global markets. With a massive capacity of around 200,000 barrels per day, this facility, once a flagship joint venture with international partners before PDVSA assumed full control, breathes financial life into Venezuela's oil-dependent economy by unlocking the true value of its black gold, while simultaneously producing valuable byproducts such as 900 tons of sulfur daily for fertilizers and pharmaceuticals, beyond the roaring furnaces and steel towers. Petrocedeno's significance ripples through the country's fragile economy as a critical revenue generator amid sanctions and production slumps, contributing to PDVSA's multi-billion-dollar exports and helping fuel a cautious but real national recovery as output edges toward 1.1 million barrels per day this year. It sustains thousands of jobs across Anzoátegui state. It supports local industries, and it stands as a towering symbol of national resilience in monetizing vast reserves that could reshape the country's future. In a nation where oil is not just an industry, but a pulse of life itself, Petrocedeno is not merely infrastructure, it is a lifeline. This is precisely why targeting this facility is more than sabotage. It is a political message aimed straight at Nicolas Maduro, a warning that Venezuela's oil infrastructure will be crippled if Washington dares to attempt an invasion. YouTube tries its best to censor true information like this, but if you like the video and share it widely, we will beat the algorithm together, so subscribe if you haven't already. You see, there have been many attacks since President Trump arrogantly threatened to teach Venezuela a lesson. On November 13th, 8 workers were killed and nearly 60% of fuel supplies wiped out after a deadly gas explosion at the Muscar complex.
I think it's hard to imagine anything like this happening easily or quickly. I always go back to our intervention in Vietnam, where people landed on the beach, the Marines went inland, the Army eventually came in, and everyone asked immediately, what are we attacking? What's our objective? And after much confusion, they came up with one. I look at Venezuela with a 1,700-mile coastline, 1,380-mile border with Brazil, and a similar border of about roughly 1,379 miles with Colombia. And I asked the same question. What are we going to do? What are these 17,000 troops in Puerto Rico going to do? How do they get there? Once they arrive, what do they do? I see nothing clear or unambiguous about the thinking or planning behind this thing they're calling Southern Spear.
And what would war look like? I mean, would it be boots on the ground? You mentioned an extraordinary number of American troops in Puerto Rico. I believe, correct me if my belief is wrong, there are also 10,000 Marines off the coast of Venezuela in these various ships.
Well, I'd be surprised if they weren't, because the one thing that's easily seized is the international airport, the Bolivar International Airport. It's right on the coast. A couple of thousand Marines should be able to secure that airport very, very easily. Now, what happens after you secure the airport? How do you bring in other troops? Where do they go? Caracas is a little further inland, and it's surrounded by mountains and hills. There are some tunnels that go through the mountains and hills into Caracas. How do we get in there? I guess we could fly. I guess you could also have airborne drops. I hear a lot from my friends on active duty about repeating Panama. You know, one of the things that we did in Panama was he had this airborne assault. You have all of these light infantry-centric generals at the top of the army that just can't wait to launch another airborne assault. The problem is that Venezuela is not Panama, Judge. Venezuela is huge. You can get in, I think, fairly easily, particularly given the offshore presence that we've got. But then what do you do when you get there, and how do you plan to get out? I mean, unless you can very rapidly install a new government that is friendly to you, that can maintain some level of order in the country, you face the possibility of total disintegration of public order. That means that you have no control over what goes on inside the country, and everyone and their brother can possibly take a shot at you. They've got 30 million people. How many of those will resist is anybody's guess. But I just don't see how the Panamanian experience really informs us in Venezuela. Now, there's also talk about getting into Venezuela, if for no other reason, to stop the supply of oil to Cuba, which has been an important lifeline. That would align with Secretary of State Rubio's long-term goals in the Caribbean Basin. But again, we don't know where all the air and missile defense capabilities are on the ground that the Russians have provided. And we're not even sure that what won't ensue is something similar to the proxy war we've been waging in Ukraine against Russia, that the Russians would turn around and effectively wage a similar proxy war against us in Venezuela, using Brazilian, Colombian, as well as Venezuela paramilitaries to attack us. I mean, the whole thing is a disaster in my judgment.
Two comments from what you said. One is, good God, we've been starving the people of Cuba since 1962. Now we're going to try and cut off their oil. Why? This doesn't change the regime. It just impoverishes the population, and Rubio must know that.
Well, except that Rubio also knows that Cuba is probably weaker today than it has ever been in its history. There's really nothing in Cuba anymore but poverty. And he may regard this as a golden opportunity to knock off the regime in Cuba as well, especially once you've strangled the Maduro regime in Caracas. I mean, this is all speculative. Obviously neither you nor I nor any of us are invited to participate in any of these discussions or listen to any briefings. But looking at the numbers of forces involved, looking at Venezuela's relationship with Cuba, one has to conclude that there's a lot more going on here than simply regime change in Venezuela.
Thank you for watching to this stage. Support honest journalism by subscribing to the channel.
Trump has launched a fresh wave of aggression against Venezuela, branding Nicolas Maduro's alleged Cartel de los Soles a terrorist organization. Caracas says this isn't counter-narcotics, it's political punishment. Another desperate attempt by Washington to crush a sovereign nation that refuses to bow to US pressure. Maduro's government is calling out the hypocrisy. The terrorist label isn't a legal ruling, it's a weapon, a Washington trick designed to justify sanctions, asset seizures, and possible military action. Caracas says Trump is using American law not for security, but for regime change theatrics dressed up as counter-terrorism. And as the ink dries on the terror designation, the US Navy moves into attack posture. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, is now stationed near Venezuelan waters. Live fire drills and F-35 patrols, a show of force that Caracas calls intimidation with no legal basis. In a blistering response, Maduro's government has fired back, calling Trump's accusations fabricated, politically motivated, and rooted in Washington's obsession with toppling governments that won't kneel. Caracas says Venezuela is being targeted not for crime, but for independence. The region is on edge. Latin American governments and human rights groups warn that sanctions and military pressure will worsen Venezuela's humanitarian crisis. Experts say Trump's strategy risks destabilizing the entire Caribbean, all while Washington claims it is simply fighting narco-terrorism. Tonight, the world watches a familiar fault line, a superpower turning counter-terrorism language into a geopolitical weapon, and a nation refusing to surrender its sovereignty. Washington insists this is pressure. Caracas says this is provocation. One trigger, and this standoff could turn global.
The situation around Venezuela continues to deteriorate rapidly. So, a few hours ago, the Trump administration officially confirmed that the current occupant of the White House had issued NOTAM airspace warning about the potentially dangerous situation in Venezuela and the Caribbean Sea. It is reported that the U.S. authorities have warned all aircraft to avoid entering this area until February 16, 2026. In addition, Washington has made it clear that the situation inside Venezuela and around its borders is rapidly deteriorating, and that the United States cannot guarantee the safety of not only civilian aircraft, but also ships. It is noteworthy that immediately after that, independent monitoring services announced that civilian aircraft had stopped flying over Venezuela. Thus, the United States has taken a big step towards creating a no-fly zone over the territory of a sovereign country. Simultaneously with this, the most powerful and advanced aircraft carrier of the U.S. Navy, Gerald Ford, approached the shores of Venezuela. As a result, the U.S. group in the Caribbean was significantly strengthened. However, the U.S. authorities did not stop there. A few days ago, a modern amphibious transport dock ship USS Fort Lauderdale and an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer also appeared in the Gulf of Paria, between Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago. Furthermore, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima was spotted northeast of the Venezuelan La Orquilla Island. And finally, south of Puerto Rico, monitoring services recorded the arrival of the landing platform dock USS San Antonio. Thus, everything that is happening indicates that the U.S. authorities may launch a war on Venezuela at any moment. Journalists from the news agency Reuters also added oil to the fire. So, on November 23, referring to 4 senior representatives of the Trump administration, they said that the United States would begin full-scale military operations against Venezuela within a few days. And it seems that the Venezuelan authorities are also well aware of this. It became known that, as an additional precaution, Caracas has already begun developing several resistance strategies in the event of a war with the United States. For example, the Venezuelan authorities began to create guerrilla groups in almost 300 zones of the country. It is noteworthy that over the past 10 days, more than 100,000 people have joined the ranks of these guerrilla groups. In addition, Venezuela also has a Plan B, in case the United States manages to eliminate the entire military and political leadership of the country. In this case, the special services of Venezuela and armed supporters of the ruling party will begin to create riots on the streets of Caracas and other key cities of the country. As a result, Venezuela will become an ungovernable country for American invaders. Against this backdrop, Magomed Kadzoev, an authoritative expert and senior researcher at the Institute of Latin America, declared that the resistance strategies developed by the Venezuelan authorities, with the active support of Caracas by Russia, China, and Iran, significantly reduce the likelihood of a successful U.S. military operation in Venezuela. Yes, my dear truth seekers, you heard it right, Iran has also begun to take an active part in strengthening Venezuela's defense capability. By the way, a few hours ago, US intelligence officially confirmed that Iran had transferred Shahid kamikaze drones to Venezuela, capable of hitting targets up to 2,500 kilometers away. It is noteworthy that even Tehran did not deny this information. Thus, Venezuela received the opportunity not only to attack US military bases in Florida, but also US aircraft carrier strike groups in the Caribbean Sea. Given the fact that Yemen's Houthis have quite successfully used Iranian kamikaze drones against American warships, it becomes clear that in the hands of the professional Venezuelan military, these unmanned aerial vehicles will become a real nightmare for the US Navy. Furthermore, Iran has also sent its officers to Venezuela, who have already begun to train Venezuelan soldiers in hybrid warfare tactics and the construction of underground tunnels. Simultaneously with this, Russia continues to increase supplies of the latest weapons systems to Venezuela. As it turned out, along with modern air defense systems such as Panzer-S and Tor-M1, Moscow also transferred a large number of Kh-31 tactical guided air-to-ground missiles, capable of destroying all types of warships. As for China, Beijing has provided significant support to Venezuela's economy, amid tensions between Caracas and Washington. In particular, China has approved a trade agreement with Venezuela that includes zero tariffs on approximately 400 categories of goods. Against this backdrop, it becomes clear why Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro feels confident, and even dances on stage, singing Western songs. Most likely, he understands perfectly well that even if the United States attacks Venezuela, there is a high probability that Washington will suffer a crushing defeat. Amid all this, information appeared that Trump supported Putin's terms on Ukraine in the hope that Russia would not interfere with the United States in overthrowing Nicolas Maduro. Simply put, there are rumors that Trump is giving Ukraine to Putin, demanding Venezuela and its oil in return. Well, my friends, I personally believe that Vladimir Putin should not trust Donald Trump. Given the fact that the United States constantly violates oaths and promises, Russia should not give Venezuela to Washington, as there is a high probability that in 5-10 years, the United States will once again want to create a new anti-Russian project in Moscow's backyard. We all understand perfectly well that Washington needs Venezuela because of its oil, which will allow the United States to maintain world leadership by lowering energy prices. On the other hand, if Moscow loses Venezuela, Russia will lose its status as a world-class superpower. Against this backdrop, I urge Putin to go all the way not only in Ukraine, but also in Venezuela. Russia is simply obliged to stop the Western imperialists in Venezuela, just as she did in Ukraine.
Why should the United States be wary of the Venezuelan Air Force? Tensions resurfaced during the Trump administration when Venezuelan vessels were accused of drug smuggling and became targets of U.S. military operations in the Caribbean. However, what was surprising was that these actions quickly drew the attention of two global powers, Russia and China. Both strongly condemned the increased U.S. military presence in the southern Caribbean and warned that Washington's actions off the coast of Venezuela could ignite a fire that threatens regional stability. If the U.S. continues to ignore warnings from Russia and China, could these two superpowers ultimately stand behind Venezuela? A storm may be brewing. Keep your eyes on the story. Amid this complex situation, Venezuela's recent actions have drawn global attention, particularly from major news outlets such as Euronews. The deployment of over 2,500 troops to the Caribbean island of La Orchila for military exercises, featuring Russian-made fighter jets armed with anti-ship missiles, has significantly heightened tensions. This move came in response to President Donald Trump's announcement of a U.S. attack on 3 Venezuelan vessels, an escalation that seemed inevitable. Venezuela, a resource-rich nation often under geopolitical pressure, finds itself at a crossroads. Facing external threats, the country has naturally sought strong allies. In this context, Russia has emerged as its most reliable partner, offering much-needed advanced military technology. The Venezuelan Air Force has released footage of its Sukhoi Su-30 fighter jets equipped with Russian Kh-31 Krypton anti-ship missiles, a clear demonstration of this strategic collaboration. These missiles are believed to have been acquired from Russia between 2007 and 2008, marking a long-standing and continuously evolving defense relationship. Is the superiority of the Kh-31 Krypton missile what makes it a strategic choice for Venezuela? The Russian Kh-31 Krypton anti-ship missile is no ordinary weapon. It represents the pinnacle of Russian military engineering, designed to deliver a lethal blow to maritime targets. One of its main advantages is its remarkable speed, reaching up to Mach 3.5. This high velocity makes it difficult for enemy defense systems to intercept, leaving them with very little reaction time. In addition, the missile has an impressive range, allowing it to be launched from a safe distance, well beyond the reach of enemy ship defenses. The integration of the Kh-31 Krypton with Venezuela's Sukhoi Su-30 creates a deadly synergy. The Su-30, as a multi-role fighter jet, is designed to carry a wide array of weaponry, and the integration of this missile ensures that Venezuela possesses precise and powerful anti-ship strike capabilities. The Su-30's advanced avionics enable pilots to identify, track, and target enemy ships with high accuracy, maximizing the effectiveness of the Kh-31. This combination gives Venezuela the ability to defend its maritime territory and project power in the region, sending a clear message to any party that dares to threaten its sovereignty. Although Venezuela's military is no longer considered the most formidable in Latin America, especially its air force, it's important to understand the context and nuances. It's true that the country faces chronic maintenance issues, a shortage of spare parts due to sanctions, and declining readiness levels. However, this narrative often overlooks Venezuela's resilience and ingenuity in navigating adversity. The nation's air force, relying on a mixed fleet of Cold War-era leftovers and a handful of modern Russian fighter jets, has managed to maintain a deterrent posture, a testament to successful collaboration with Russia. Around 24 Su-30 Mk, 2 flanker jets, imported from Russia in the mid-2000s, form the backbone of Venezuela's air defense. As sleek twin-engine multi-role fighters, the Su-30s provide Venezuela with considerable strike range, precision capabilities, and beyond visual range potential. It's not just about numbers, but about the quality and strategic capabilities they bring. Although expensive to maintain, U.S. sanctions that restrict access to spare parts and avionics have instead strengthened Venezuela's ties with Russia and Iran, both of which have consistently provided the support needed to keep the fleet operational. This is a classic example of how external pressure can reinforce strategic alliances rather than weaken them. In addition to the Su-30s, Venezuela also operates Russian Mi-17 HIP transport helicopters and Mi-35 Hind attack helicopters. These helicopters, capable of transporting troops and providing fire support in remote jungles and border regions, are a mainstay of Venezuela's internal security operations, deploying special forces units against smugglers or guerrilla groups along the Colombian border. Although this helicopter fleet is aging and its availability has declined due to dwindling spare parts, their vital role in maintaining internal stability should not be underestimated. How is Venezuela able to defend itself amid various challenges and pressures, especially from the United States? While the challenges faced by the Venezuelan military are not insignificant, the US must not let its guard down. Venezuela continues to expand its ties with Russia amid rising tensions with Washington. This is a testament to the strength of diplomacy and carefully built strategic alliances. Russia, as a dominant military power, continues to show its commitment to supporting its allies. The development of Russia's defense industry is something worth paying attention to. In 2025, Russia's Su-30 fighter jets, which have proven themselves on the Ukrainian battlefield, will be mass-produced along with the Su-34, Su-35, and Su-57, with a total of 57 units. This indicates a significant increase in production capacity. Additionally, 250 T-90M tanks, 365 artillery systems, and 1,100 armored vehicles, including the BTR-82 and BMP-3, will also be produced. Russia is also ramping up production of its Garan UAVs and has the capacity to manufacture around 2,500 precision-guided missiles annually, such as the Kinzhal, KH-101, Iskander, and others, equivalent to around 200 missiles per month. Through 2037, Russia has ensured that tank production will continue, undeterred by the presence of UAVs, as its three main battle tanks, the T-14 Armata, T-90M, and T-80, will continue to be modernized. The same goes for new generation artillery systems, such as the Koalitsiya, Mista, Malva, Hyacinth, and Magnolia. So, what about China? Could something even more surprising for the US be taking shape in Venezuela? That's all for today, and thanks for watching.
Gaze to the far north, facing the Caribbean Sea, right across from U.S. territory. Venezuela is no longer just that oil-rich nation struggling under sanctions. Something much bigger, much deeper is happening. The country is becoming one of the most strategic and sensitive military hotspots on the planet. And take note, this did not go unnoticed, it did not happen quietly, it was not a slow process. Washington sees it, analysts see it, and now the entire world is asking the same question. What is really happening in Venezuela? If you want to understand the background, the strategic moves, and why this could change everything in the region, don't miss a thing. Subscribe to Neurored and join us as we unravel this military mystery that is shaking Latin America. The answer is simpler than many believe. Venezuela is no longer alone. Two global powers are backing its transformation, Russia and China. Various intelligence reports reveal that Russia has given Venezuela advanced, state-of-the-art air defense and anti-missile systems. And when I say advanced, I don't mean old equipment or forgotten military relics. We're talking about sophisticated hardware designed for mission-critical operations with extremely high range and precision. One of the pillars of this delivery is the S300VM Antios Nentos, one of the most powerful variants within the S300 family. This system can intercept fighter jets, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, and other complex aerial targets. Its missiles have a range of up to 200 kilometers and can operate at altitudes of up to 30,000 meters, while its advanced radars allow it to detect dozens of targets simultaneously and coordinate multiple attacks in real time. But defense is not limited to this strategic layer. Medium-range systems have also been deployed, such as the Book M2C, capable of covering targets between 3 and 45 kilometers away and at altitudes of up to 25 kilometers. This system acts as a bridge between long-range and close-in defense, intercepting threats that get too close and ensuring more comprehensive coverage. For point defense, the Pantier S-1 systems have been incorporated, designed to shoot down aircraft, helicopters, guided munitions and drones at short ranges between 1.2 and 20 kilometers. Their combination of missiles and automatic cannons allows for rapid reaction to saturated or simultaneous attacks. The S-300 systems that Venezuela has are not obsolete versions. They are the modern Ante-2500 variant, capable of tracking dozens of targets simultaneously and launching missiles against several of them in a coordinated manner. This means that Venezuela can react quickly to multiple attacks and maintain its functional air defense, even in complex environments. Crucially, keeping these systems operational requires specialized technical and logistical support, indicating that the collaboration with Russia included not only the delivery of equipment, but also assistance to ensure that they function optimally. Together, this combination of long, medium and short-range systems, coupled with state-of-the-art radars and mobile command posts, makes Venezuela a territory with highly integrated, echelon air defense capable of responding to multiple threats simultaneously. What once seemed improbable in the region is now becoming a military reality of great scope and technological sophistication, capable of altering the strategic dynamics of the Caribbean and northern South America. These systems include advanced radars with detection capabilities hundreds of kilometers away, capable of tracking stealth aircraft, cruise missiles, drones, and strategic bombers. Their launchers can intercept threats even before they enter the country's airspace, creating a true proactive defense zone. In other words, Venezuela has taken a qualitative leap in its defensive capacity, becoming a territory where every nearby air or maritime movement can be monitored in real time and, if necessary, neutralized quickly and precisely. The integration of these technologies not only protects the territory, but also allows for the coordination of automatic and centralized responses, reducing the margin of error and increasing effectiveness in the face of complex or simultaneous attacks. Venezuela is no longer just a country with modern weapons. It is transforming into a strategic point capable of challenging the freedom of air operations in its region, something that until recently seemed unthinkable. Not only does this change regional dynamics, it also forces the United States and its allies to rethink their strategies in the Caribbean and northern South America. The question that now arises is inevitable. How far will this silent militarization go? Some experts claim that Venezuela's older BS-300 CBM systems have been modernized to near export-level S-400s, one of the most advanced air defense systems in the world. To give you an idea, the S-400 can track and engage stealth aircraft, long-range cruise missiles, strategic bombers, drones, and even certain types of hypersonic weapons. If this modernization is effective, Venezuela could now establish a no-fly zone that extends for hundreds of kilometers, virtually controlling the skies above its territory and surroundings. This means that any approaching reconnaissance, patrol, or attack aircraft could be detected and tracked with precision from the moment they enter the airspace or even before, thanks to the combination of long-range radars and strategic missile systems. And this is where tensions escalate. The reach of these systems could encompass parts of Colombia, Trinidad and Tobago, and even areas routinely used by U.S. patrol aircraft in the Caribbean, turning nearby international zones into areas of constant monitoring. For U.S. officials, this is no mere technicality. It is a real cause for concern because it changes the strategic dynamics of the region. It forces a rethinking of patrols, flight routes, and surveillance strategies, and it shows that Venezuela could, for the first time, control and limit freedom of air operation near US territory. The question that inevitably arises is, how far can this capability extend, and what consequences will it have for regional and hemispheric security? If these systems were fully operational, Venezuela would have the most powerful air defense network in the entire Western Hemisphere outside of the United States. A strength that would completely change the military dynamics in the region. In short, what was once a country under sanctions and with strategic constraints could now interfere with, monitor, and challenge the freedom of air movement in the region. And that leaves us with a troubling question. How far are these advances prepared to go, and what implications will they have for all of Latin America? All this reaches a whole new level when China enters the picture. Beijing is reportedly providing Venezuela with long-range surveillance radars capable of detecting stealth aircraft, cruise missiles, strategic bombers, and drones from hundreds of kilometers away, even in adverse weather conditions or in environments with electronic interference. But that's not all. China is also supplying advanced electronic warfare systems designed to jam enemy communications, confuse adversary radars, and block satellite signals, greatly complicating any reconnaissance or attack attempts. In addition, satellite-integrated command and control networks are included that allow constant and coordinated monitoring of any air or maritime threat in real time, connecting radars, missile systems, and decision centers to achieve a virtually automatic response. In other words, if Russian missiles function as an impenetrable shield, Chinese technology acts as the nervous system that coordinates it, optimizing the detection, analysis, and response to any threat and making Venezuela a highly monitored territory that is extremely difficult to breach. This combination turns the country into an unprecedented strategic point, where every nearby air or maritime movement can be detected, tracked, and, if necessary, neutralized with speed and precision. And here comes the really disturbing part. Decision-making software based on artificial intelligence, capable of suggesting automatic interceptions, optimizing resource allocation, and drastically reducing reaction time to any attack. If Russian missile systems function as an impenetrable shield, then what China is building is the nervous system that controls it, a digital brain that coordinates and maximizes the effectiveness of the entire defense. In other words, Venezuela is no longer just a protected territory. It could become a military control point connected to two of the world's most advanced powers, capable of monitoring, analyzing, and responding to threats almost automatically. Together, all of these systems give Venezuela an unprecedented capacity for surveillance and reaction. It can now detect hostile launches and movements from great distances, anticipating any threat before it gets close. But that's not all. The country can react in a matter of seconds, coordinating missiles, radars, and defense systems almost automatically thanks to the integration of artificial intelligence and satellites. And most disturbingly, it is capable of jamming or blocking enemy surveillance satellites, which makes aerial monitoring difficult and can disrupt reconnaissance or attack drones. In short, Venezuela is no longer simply an armed country. It is becoming a territory that is difficult to detect, complicated to monitor, and extremely complex to attack. Every air movement, every drone, every reconnaissance attempt now faces an integrated, intelligent, and deeply coordinated defense system. What once seemed like a remote or hypothetical scenario is now becoming a tangible reality in the heart of the Caribbean and South America. Washington is paying increasingly intense attention to it. The United States Southern Command has increased its intelligence flights, sending specialized aircraft to map movements and capabilities. Additionally, more surveillance drones have been spotted near Venezuelan airspace, monitoring suspicious activity. Naval patrols in the Caribbean have become more frequent and coordinated, and statements from U.S. defense officials now sound more direct and concerned than ever. But what's truly disturbing is not what the United States is doing, but what it all means for the region and for global geopolitics. For decades, the Monroe Doctrine positioned Latin America as a strategic territory under U.S. influence. Now, for the first time in modern history, a country just minutes from U.S. airspace is being equipped with advanced Russian missile systems and cutting-edge Chinese military software. And this is a game changer. What was once considered impossible or distant is now happening right in the heart of the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela is no longer just a sanctioned oil country, but a strategic point that can monitor, challenge, and complicate U.S. freedom of action in the region. The question that remains is a disturbing one. How will Washington respond to a scenario it never imagined coming so close to its borders? Many analysts agree that this is not simply about arms trade or military cooperation. What we are seeing looks like a strategic move to build in a two-way D zone, that is, restricted access and area denial, right next to the United States. It is a pattern we have seen before: Crimea, Syria, the South China Sea. Now, for the first time, this same pattern is emerging in the Caribbean. If Venezuela manages to complete a layered defense posture combining long-range systems, medium-range systems, mobile air defense vehicles, integrated radars, and cyber warfare capabilities, the country could become an unparalleled air defense territory in the Western Hemisphere. In other words, it could withstand a large-scale foreign air campaign, something that until now seemed unthinkable in this region. This not only alters the military balance in Latin America, but sends a clear message about how great powers are expanding their influence, using advanced technology and strategies previously reserved for conflicts in Europe or Asia. The Caribbean is no longer a quiet area. It is becoming a strategic point where technology, power, and global geopolitics intersect. The real question is not whether Venezuela is preparing for conflict. The real question is the world witnessing the beginning of a new geopolitical battleground right in the United States' backyard? Now it's your turn. Do you think Russia and China are forging a new balance of power in Latin America? Or is this the spark that could ignite a future global confrontation? Let us know your thoughts.
In 2023, we here at Redacted warned that war could be coming to the Arctic Circle, which is quickly emerging as one of the most important trade routes in the world. Russia and China, during the Biden administration, basically set up shop with icebreakers and territorial water controls and trade routes and all of that, while the United States basically sat back and let all of this happen under the Biden administration. To be fair, the previous Trump administration didn't do anything about it either. Neither did the Obama administration. So it's like a long history of not doing anything about the Arctic. In 2023, we warned about Norway's actions, specifically, which aimed to break its relationship with Russia, trying to basically blame Russian spies and the Norwegian embassy. And like Russia was like, what are you talking about? Clearly, this seemed like a ruse. And this came right after, of course, Norway and the United States conspired to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. So something was going on here. And at the time, it was obvious to us somebody was pulling the strings of Norway. Somebody was doing something here that Norway wasn't acting alone on this. Here's our report from 2023. Watch, look how young I look. So what exactly are you doing, Norway? Digging your own grave here? Because it doesn't help that the stooge in charge of NATO is the same guy, a guy by the name of Jens Stoltenberg. He's Norwegian. And the next battle is over the shipping lanes through Arctic waters. So what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to set up for a battle right now? We know that these sort of strategic exercises have been going back and forth where Russia will basically try to hit Norwegian targets in their practice rounds. And then Norway basically is doing the same thing, trying to hit Russian targets. So Are we seeing like the staging grounds for the next battle that's coming over the Arctic Circle? Look at no grays in my hair 2 years ago.
Otherwise, you look the same, honey.
You guys already know about the bearskin hoodie, though, right? If you've been waiting to get yourself one, now is the time. I wear it every morning as I'm walking the dog. Right now, they got a big Black Friday, Cyber Monday plan coming up. So I just want you guys to pay attention to this. It's officially hoodie season right now. Cold mornings, windy days, surprise snow. And right now, Bearskin is running their biggest deal of the year. We're talking 60% off for this Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Now, this isn't some old fleece. This thing is built with 340 GSM bearskin fleece, 10 pockets, rugged, athletic. It actually looks really good on you. Plus, if it starts pouring, you can just zip on that heavy rainstorm jacket and instantly level up to full waterproof protection. You'll get free U.S. shipping from their U.S. warehouse and gear that'll last you season after season. So here's where you need to do to get that 60% off. Just text the word redacted to 36912. Again, that's redacted to 36912, and they'll text you a link so you can lock in your 60% off before this sale disappears. Don't wait till the weather gets really bad. Grab a bearskin right now. And one more thing, when you support Bearskin, you're also supporting the Fallen Outdoors and the Hope for the Warriors Veterans Program. So you're not just buying great gear, you're backing a cause that actually matters. So grab your bearskin while that Black Friday deal is still live. Text redacted to 36912. So are we barreling towards a naval war in the Arctic? Now, we even highlighted the warnings from Billy Meyer, who back in 1987 warned that war would be coming to Scandinavia and this area, and that the West will go to war with Russia over control of these shipping lanes, and even specifically talked about Russia moving troops in the Argahansk region. And guess what? They have. So all of these things are now coming true. You can believe it or not. That's totally up to you. This was 1987. And it turns out in our 2023 prediction, it turns out it was right, because now the Trump administration is scrambling to play catch up to Russia and China. This week, Kristi Noem, the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, announced a defense and industrial cooperation pact with Canada and Finland called the Icebreaker Collaboration Effort. And the three nations will collaborate on building 11 new icebreaker ships over the coming years to bolster Arctic defense and sovereignty, basically trying to take control of this region, going head-to-head now against Russia and China. Listen to Kristi Noem.
Today is a major milestone in the race to secure the Arctic for all of our countries. The Arctic is the world's last, most wild frontier, and our adversaries are racing to claim its strategic position and its rich natural resources for their own. If we give up that high ground, then we will condemn future generations to permanent insecurity.
All right,
We're
so
not going to let
permanent high ground? You don't have the high ground at all. If we give up the high ground, you don't have the high ground at all. This is like Devil's Den during Gettysburg. You're like the Confederate soldiers pinned down on those boulders while the Union forces are up on the hill.
Give it up, Anakin.
Right,
I've got
you get
the high ground.
Like, you do not have the high ground at all. What most people don't know, because Russia doesn't really talk about it, is what Russia is doing in the Arctic. You've heard all about China's Belt and Road Initiative, which creates shipping lanes, rail infrastructure, trade routes all through Asia, Middle East, Indochina. But you might not have heard about Russia's Arctic Road Initiative, which is basically the same thing, removing dependence on the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, that the United States has a major hand in, of course, and no more, and creating massive movable infrastructure controlled by Russia. Think about, instead of, there's no land there, of course, but imagine the almost like having virtual land moving through this entire area. And that's what Russia is doing right now. This new trade route, which would control trade between the East and the West, the North and the South, doesn't rely on the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, and it can take upwards of months for deliveries if you have to rely on those trade routes. You could shave months off of all of these trade routes by just using the Arctic. Russia is in the lead right now to add this area to its already massive mineral resources, and the U.S. is way behind. Here was Rex Tillerson after he left the Trump administration. This is during the Biden administration. Listen to him talk about these icebreakers and how far behind we are.
What I can tell you is the United States is behind. We're behind all the other Arctic nations. They have dealt with this. They've gotten way ahead of us. The Russians made it a strategic priority. Even the Chinese are building ice-breaking tankers. Now, why are they building icebreakers? They're not an Arctic nation because they see the value of these passages. So we're late to the game. I think we have one functioning icebreaker today. Their Coast Guard's very proud of it.
Yeah.
As crummy as it is.
Yeah.
And I know in the budget, there is money in the budget for us
For one more.
to build another icebreaker.
to make one more, right?
The whole,
and we've got this old icebreaker. It's like, man, this thing is old. It's like falling apart, but we're proud of this one icebreaker that we have. So if they officially add the Arctic area to the Russian territory, then they will have had their hand on roughly 16% of the world's untapped oil, 30% of the world's undiscovered gas that lies buried beneath the ocean there, in addition to vast mineral deposits of nickel, platinum, many rare earth metals right now. And the United States under President Trump has declared certain precious metals and rare earth minerals as a vital national resource right now. In the AI revolution and everything else, we need it. We don't have it. So he's declared it now a national security risk. So here we are barreling towards potential war in the Arctic Circle. And, Russia is amassing troops in those areas. So this is not a flight of fancy. Thank you for that. Someone in the chat room just said, hey, Clayton, by the way, Devil's Den at Gettysburg changed hands many times. Yes, it did during the Civil War or during the Battle of Gettysburg. Yes, it did. But as a Gettysburg fan and having grown up in Pennsylvania, it's amazing to stand there on those boulders where you can see chips of the boulders where the Union soldiers have hit the boulders and pieces of the rock have broken off. And you can see where the Confederates were pinned down. It's super cool if you like American history. Anyway, that's what's happening in the Arctic.
Accelerating in the coldest place on Earth. The Arctic and Antarctic, once seen as remote scientific frontiers, as we know very well, are now transforming into arenas where security, sovereignty, and strategic advantage matter more than anything else. The Arctic has shifted from a remote, low-tension region to a zone of accelerating strategic rivalry between the United States and Russia. While the competition is still far from open conflict, geopolitical, military, economic, and environmental dynamics are definitely intensifying. This is a fascinating topic that I will definitely write more about over on my Substack and my Patreon, so please make sure that you are subscribed there too to stay updated. As you may know, for decades, these regions were framed around climate change, around environmental protection, and the rise of indigenous communities. These themes have not really fully disappeared, but they are no longer at the very center of the global conversation. Today, the polar regions are being reshaped by a new geopolitical logic. Who controls energy, who controls critical resources, who controls choke points, and ultimately, who controls the future. The areas of direct competition between Russia and the United States include, first and foremost, military posturing. Both sides frequently operate submarines and strategic bombers close to each other's territory. Cold War-style intercepts, we've had several of those recently, are actually rising again. The second area of competition is related to logistics. Russia views the Northern Sea route as key to its national interests. And in addition to that, there are vast Arctic seabed resources and minerals that many powers want to get their hands on. In the Arctic, the shift to a great power competition is impossible to ignore. The Arctic Council was once dominated by collaborative environmental agendas, but lately its discussions have been grounded in national security, in strategic waterways, and competition for mineral and energy reserves. Climate concerns are still acknowledged somewhat, but only within the more pragmatic context of sovereignty, economic interest, and strategic risk. Russia remains the most dominant power in the Arctic. This is because Russia views the Arctic as a core national interest area, militarily, economically, and of course, ideologically. President Vladimir Putin consistently frames the Arctic as a vital national project. Russia maintains the largest military infrastructure of any Arctic state. It includes more than 50 Arctic military bases modernized or reopened since 2014, as well as radar systems, anti-air and anti-ship missiles, and airfields across the Northern Sea route. The Northern Fleet is effectively the centerpiece of Russian nuclear second strike capability. China's economic rise is the driving force behind the country's emerging interest in the Arctic. Beijing is now seen by most observers as the primary geopolitical challenger in both polar regions, but its ambitions actually differ between the two poles. In the Arctic, China is very deliberate and strategic. It points to being a near-Arctic state, as it claims. Its interests are very clear too. They include access to Russia's northern corridor, stable supply chains of natural resources, of course, possible future claims to seabed minerals, and long-term access to fisheries and rare earth. China invests, it builds facilities, it deploys scientific missions, and it therefore expands its influence wherever possible, which helps it, of course, expand its foothold in the region. But Russia appears to see China as a partner rather than a rival, and it sees China as a partner that strengthens its Arctic ambitions. And their cooperation is increasingly viewed by Western governments as a single, merged challenge that's now driving the militarization of the region. The West is now increasingly focusing on the Arctic as the new front against Russia and China. For example, Canada has been rethinking its strategic posture in the Arctic. In August, the Canadian government lifted restrictions on participating in U.S. regional missile defense systems and entered negotiations to join the Golden Dome, which would potentially become a multi-layer defense shield across the northern frontier. Canada has also joined the Ice Pact, which is a trilateral partnership with the United States and Finland to pool expertise and resources for building new icebreakers. And in 2024, Canada actually published a new and more assertive or aggressive, depending on how you look at it, Arctic foreign policy. In addition to that, it also announced increases in military spending, including nearly $500 million that are designated for Arctic initiatives. The United States is also actively expanding its footprint in the region. Despite disagreements with Canada on trade and water management and many other different things, Washington and Ottawa are actually aligning on Arctic infrastructure, on maritime domain awareness, and on military buildup. The United States has announced major investments in new Arctic ports, including a deep water facility in Nome in Alaska, and has fast-tracked the development of Arctic-capable vessels. Responsibility for America's Arctic shipbuilding has shifted from the National Security Council to the Office of Management and Budget, which is regarded as a sign that policymakers want to accelerate progress and to bring significant resources to the table. Washington's own research priorities are changing too. The U.S. Arctic Research Commission now defines national security in the region through 4 pillars: military strength, community resilience, energy development, and economic prosperity. So across the Nordic region too, Finland has positioned itself as one of the most proactive partners, I should say, pushing deeper cooperation with the United States and with Canada. Sweden and Norway are also expanding their own Arctic military strategies, and Denmark, because of its ties to Greenland, of course, is increasing its military spending to meet Trump's requirements. Looking ahead, the most likely scenario is a dramatic expansion of Arctic cooperation among Western nations as a way to counter Russia and to counter China. And so due to this, it is likely that the United States may push for clearer guarantees on Greenland's political direction. Washington may not require direct sovereignty over the island, but it will almost certainly insist that Greenland never fall under Chinese influence. So let me know what you think about this new frontier, something that we don't really hear much about, but it is extremely, extremely important. Thank you so much for watching.
Chief Umerov was also there.
And I want to dive deeply into the 28-point plan. I don't know if it's a subterfuge to keep people's eyes off of the Israelis attacking Lebanon and the United States about to attack Venezuela. We'll get to that eventually. But do we know the origins of the 28-point plan? I mean, who speaks for Russia? Who speaks for the United States? Is it these two billionaire buddies of Trump and Putin?
No, Putin's personal representative in the person of Kirill Dmitriev flew off to Florida to talk with Steve Witkoff for 3 days at the end of October. Therein lies the solution. We know from pretty reliable sources that Ukrainian National Security Council Chief Umerov was also there for a while. So they whittled this thing together in a kind of a talking points sort of way. It's just, parts of it are self-contradictory, inconsistent, and it's very, very unfinished. But the big thing is that Trump is making a big thing of it, and Putin is playing along. Now, let me introduce a extraneous factor here. First of all, I agree with those, including Alistair, who say that in mid-October, Trump finally realized that he had been diddled, that he had been led down the garden path by the likes of Kellogg and perhaps Rubio and other hardliners within the White House and State Department. So mid-October is big. After that came not only the collapse of Ukrainian forces on the front line, but also the raising of corruption charges. Very convenient to get Zelensky a little bit scared. Here's my chronology. Here's the extraneous factor. When do the nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize begin for 2026? It says, I looked it up, mid-October. Well, let's say that's October 15th. So I did a little chronology here. Oh, well, okay, October 15th. What happened on the 16th? Oh, well, Trump announced that we're going to have a summit. It'll be at Budapest, and we're going to get to a final solution of the Korean crisis at the 16th. Okay, 17th. Zelensky comes to the White House, and Trump says, no, don't even think about those missiles, those missiles that you've been trying to get. We're not going to give them to you. The 17th, okay? Whoa, there was a big backlash, okay? So Trump had to do a little dancing and took a lot of flack. So what do we have on the 22nd? We have the imposition of really tough really tough sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, the two big Russian oil companies. Okay, that's the 22nd. But the Russians like to say "Adnaka." But what happens on the 23rd, the day after the imposition of these terrible sanctions, which even Scott Bessent doesn't place any store by, but that's another thing. What happened on the next day? Oh, Kirill Dmitriev is sent by Putin to Florida to talk to Witkoff, to talk to Umerov when he shows up, and they chisel this thing together. It's more the nature of talking points. The big deal is that Putin said, well, yeah, let's consider that. That could be a basis for the final settlement. That's really interesting. So what do I see here? I see that Trump, I mean, I blanch when I hear myself say this. He's partially motivated by wanting to have a Nobel Peace Prize. And if he gets maybe something going by Thanksgiving and maybe even enough going for a ceasefire by Christmas, oh my God, the nominations close on January 31st. Okay, now people might think that's a little ridiculous. 2 months ago, I would have thought so. But look at what Trump has said about the Nobel Peace Prize. So I think what Trump is doing here is giving the Europeans, getting them out of the flow of things. The Europeans are very scared, but they're powerless. And that's where I differ with many of my colleagues. The Europeans have no troops, they have no money, they have no leverage, okay? The leverage is not with the Europeans. So what leverage does Trump have? Well, not much, but I think Trump understands that Putin would rather have a negotiated settlement of some kind based on current realities. So he's playing on that. That's very, very little leverage. And you could see that in the points that are being discussed. You could see that in Trump saying this morning, wow, this is going to be great. We're well on our way. What did he exactly say? Oh, yeah, it's time for Europe to go it alone. Well, that's what the Guardian is saying. Here's Trump. Big progress is being made in the peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. And of course, we have Rubio and even Kellogg singing the same song over the weekend. So what do I foresee? I see some real negotiations. Russia's not going to give up much because it doesn't have to.
Right.
It's adopting this nonchalant, dismissive attitude. Okay, we'd like negotiation. We're always open to that, but we're just as soon go ahead and finish the damn thing off with a special military operations.
Take a listen to President Putin, Zelensky, President Zelensky, a gloomy President Zelensky yesterday, who pretty much is saying, look, I have to choose between the indignity of giving up all this land that I believe is part of Ukraine and the loss of my most valuable partner, the United States. Chris, cut number 3.
Зараз один з найважчих моментів нашої історії.
This is one of the most difficult moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine is now at its most intense. Ukraine may now face a very difficult choice, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, or 28 difficult points, or an extremely harsh winter. The most difficult and further risk are life without freedom, without dignity, without justice, and believing someone who has already attacked us twice.
And believing someone who has already attacked us twice. I guess he's forgotten about Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 and that subterfuge. Why would Putin trust any negotiation that the Europeans participated in? He wouldn't.
He wouldn't, and that's why they're excluded. That's why Trump has ruled them out. Now, the Europeans are described as being really enraged at this, but they have no leverage. As I said before, they have no money, they have no arms, they have nothing without the United States. That's the all-encompassing reality for me.
What do you think Zelensky will do? Doesn't he risk not only the loss of his presidency, but maybe the loss of his life? If he concedes to this?
I think it's I think it's really a case of Zelensky will stay there as long as the U.S. and Britain think he can be useful. There's no real outside person that can take his place right now. Part of these 28 points are elections in Ukraine, and ipso facto, Zelensky would be out. So I see the U.S. and Britain and the others, no, U.S. at least, saying, look, Zelensky can hang around as long as he does what he's told. Now, as I say before, Zelensky's going to have to do what he's told. Now, if he finds that, what do you call it? If that's a dignity thing, well, all right. I mean, if he accepts what's going on here, as he will have to, well, he's got a dignity problem, but he also has a problem if he doesn't accept it. Now, if he doesn't accept it, well, he can only be really, really dumb not to accept it. Why? Because the Europeans have no leverage. They have no troops. They have no money. So if the Europeans can persuade a dumb Zelensky, look, hang in there, we'll support you for as long as it takes now that the U.S. is out of there. He's really dumber than I thought he was. I don't think he will do that. I think he'll accept that. He sort of made some motions in that regard. And his people, Umerov, for example, have been in on this. So it's not like it came as a total surprise to the Ukrainians.
The limitation of the Ukrainian troops to 600,000, that's 10 times the number that was agreed to in Istanbul in 2022 before Joe Biden and Boris Johnson interfered with it. Putin will never go along with that. I don't know where they get 600,000 troops, to be honest.
Well, that would be an interesting point if this was a proposal. This is just a bunch of talking points. The Russian word for plan also means sort of outline for discussion. So, to look at these specific provisions, 600,000, that's negotiable. They'll be at less than half of that at the final end of this thing. But the idea is that Trump feels some real pressure to get something done quick by the end of the year, like by Thanksgiving. What will he get by Thanksgiving? My God, it looks like Rubio and even Kellogg are saying, oh, we're going to get something maybe Thursday, Friday, maybe Monday of next week. Could that be? It could be Russian sign-on to an umbrella sort of thing saying, we're gonna discuss this, but one of our conditions continues to be no Ukraine and NATO. And that's understood by both sides. So if they can announce a ceasefire, possibly by the end of the year or by Christmas, wouldn't that be nice? Thanksgiving and then Christmas, then Trump may feel he's on his way to getting a Nobel Peace Prize. Again,
I think you're probably onto something with respect to the president's true motivation. To him, it's the Peace Prize. The fact that peace will come about is secondary. But I mean, almost who cares what his thoughts are as long as it brings about peace? I don't see the Russians signing a ceasefire. They've said 100 times they won't. They'll sign a peace agreement that gives them what they want. They want to get rid of the Nazi ideology. I don't know how you get rid of an ideology. They want no NATO. They want their land back. Well, they'll get the land back and they'll probably get no NATO, but they're not going to get everything they want, are they? How do you get rid of an ideology, Ray?
The Russians have all the leverage here. They're winning on the battlefield. Zelensky is being discredited mostly by I think U.S. intelligence services who are embedded in those investigatory bodies. I mean, everyone around him is charged with utter corruption. It defies, it beggars belief that Zelensky stands as pure as Caesar's wife, So, in other words, they got him where they want him. Okay, now the Russians are aware of all this, and I think they're aware. Bear in mind, talks are going on sub rosa. There are other channels, there are all kinds of channels, Witkoff and Dmitriev, Witkoff, and other people like Ushakov directly under Putin. So these things go on, and I'm not sure, but I speculate that when Trump felt this pressure after he flagrantly said, Tomahawk missiles, forget about it, okay? Well, he felt a lot of pressure and said, oh my God, I better do something. And then that's when he put on these sanctions on the 22nd. So just days later, and I'm sure Subrosi was saying, now, look, we got to do this. I got to handle Kellogg and the company, but bear in mind, we're going to work this out. And sure, the next thing you know, the next day, Dmitriev leaves for Florida and spends 3 days working out this plan with not Rubio, but with
Who is the de facto Secretary of State of the United States? Is it Marco Rubio? Is it Steve Witkoff? Is it Jared Kushner?
It's a fellow named Donald Trump. And the State Department is really Truth Social. I mean, good. Never thought I'd see this day, but official pronouncements come out from Truth Social. Some of them with block letters, so you take attention to that. But Rubio does what he's told. Now he made 180. Okay. Here he is yesterday in Geneva saying, oh, this is the cat's pajamas. We never made so much progress. Well, 2 weeks ago, he was saying, oh, those damn Russians, they invaded. And we have to make sure that they don't succeed in what they're doing. Look what the blah, 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 blah. So Rubio is malleable. Okay, he wants to stay titular, at least, Secretary of State. And by the way, National Security Advisor, where he's in position to be a kind of a blockage before for any credible intelligence getting to the president. Now the end is near. Trump has seen that he's been deceived by the likes of Kellogg and Rubio to an extent. When Rubio talked to Lavrov shortly after Trump said, "Hey, let's do Budapest," well, what came of that? Well, Lavrov's a diplomat. He's not going to say anything derogatory, but Rubio apparently blew it because the next thing you know, Dmitriev is going to talk with Witkoff. So when you need talks with Witkoff, who understands what's up, okay, and who has the entree not only to Trump but to Putin. What has he met with him 6 or 7 times already? Last time for 4 or 5 hours. So when you ask me who Secretary of State is, it's Trump. And Trump relies on whoever he needs to rely on, whether it's to appease Lindsey Graham or whether it's to actually work real things out between Witkoff and whomever Putin appoints, whether it's Ushakov or whether it's Dmitriev. Dmitriev, by the way, is the economic financial czar in the Russian government. And he's the one that talks about this tunnel under the Bering Strait, talks about the magnificent economic opportunity that exists for U.S.-Russian relations. Well, that's exaggerated, but it's there. And Trump and Witkoff and these kinds of guys, well, that would really help. And why should we feel ourselves manacled by the Europeans and not pursue these opportunities? So I think that's all in the background.
Here's President Putin in military garb yesterday. Chris, cut number 2.
These people, the idea sitting on their golden pots, hardly think about their country's fate or the fate of its people.
Ordinary people of Ukraine.
The officer corps, and even more so, the ordinary soldiers. They don't have time for such thing, but you and I have our own tasks and our own goals to achieve. The most important of these is, without a doubt, the achievement of the goals of this special military operation and the resolution of the tasks that our fatherland and the people of Russia place before us. The people of Russia are counting on us, they are counting on you, and they expect the results that our country truly needs. Let's get to work.
Wow. In military garb, the people of Russia are counting on us, they are counting on you, and they expect the results that our country truly needs. He's talking about the military acquisition of real estate and the expulsion of NATO and the other goals that he's been consistently pressing for the past 2.5 years.
Yeah, this is the de facto situation, Judge. the facts on the ground is what the Russians keep talking about.
Right.
And when Putin, whether he feigns this or whether he's serious, when he adopts this nonchalant thing, I said, look, we've always been open for negotiations, but if this doesn't work out, we're just as happy pursuing the special military operation until its final end. And we could do that, and we will. Now, my take on that is that's feigned. They really want something in the nature of a negotiated settlement, which gets the U.S. to guarantee that the Ukrainians won't do the same thing they did under Biden, okay? That's clear to me. So Putin prefers that. Trump wants that. You've got a coalition, you've got a coalescing of views here. And I am hopeful that maybe not by Thanksgiving, but by the end of the year, some progress has been made. And by January 31st, the outer limit of nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize, that Trump will have something to sing about and say, hey, look, well, Gaza didn't work out all that well, but hey, how about this year? How about Ukraine?
So I'm thinking of Sergei Lavrov saying to Vladimir Putin, but what's to guarantee that a President Lindsey Graham or a President J.D. Vance or a President Marco Rubio wouldn't rearm Ukraine in 5 or 10 years, just like President Trump did during his first term?
Well, now wait a second. Trump, all he gave him were some, we used to call bazookas, some anti-tank weapons. He didn't arm. It was Biden that armed Ukraine. So, the facts on the ground speak for themselves. The Russians have won. Ukrainians have lost. J.D. Vance has said, that's it for us. We're out of it. Ukraine is not anymore our problem. The Europeans are screaming like hell because their whole political positions, these clowns, these political hacks that bubble to the top in Germany, Merz, in UK, Starmer, in France, Macron, those people are going to lose power. And, I have to say this, their priorities stay in power. So will they have any leverage? That's the big question. I don't think the Europeans have any leverage anymore. I think they've used it all up. And I think that Putin, that Trump has made it very clear, look, we're not even going to talk to you until this thing is over. Make all the suggestions you want. You got nothing. You got no leverage. I have very little leverage, says Trump, but I have some. Putin wants a deal, and we're going to get that deal sooner rather than later.
Ray McGovern, thank you very much, my dear friend. I think we're going to get a intelligence community roundtable in by the end of the week. I don't know when or I don't know how because it's Thanksgiving week, but we'll make it happen, and I'll look forward to seeing you then. All the best, my friend.
Thanks, Judge.
Thank you. Coming up at 11:30 this morning, Larry Johnson, and at 4 this afternoon, Professor Jeffrey.
Russia. So Russia didn't author it. Apart from that, we've had one version released by a Ukrainian legislator, another version leaked to Axios and the Financial Times. So there are 2 or 3 versions out there. It appears that Keith Kellogg may have been one of the people who leaked a version. Again, we don't know what version's what, but if you've read both, at least the 2 versions I've seen, you still come away with the basic conclusion that this is a document generated by the West that does not take into account Russia's fundamental demands.
Let's start with a couple of specifics. Why would the Russians agree to a Ukrainian military of 600,000 when that is many, exponentially more than what was agreed to in the Istanbul proposal trashed by Biden and Boris Johnson in 2022?
Well, in fact, they would be agreeing to a larger standing army of Ukrainians than existed at the start of the special military operation in February of 2022. Now, again, the number I've seen, one document says 600,000. The Europeans are saying, oh, 800,000. Good luck finding them. Right now, Ukraine cannot keep, an army in the field. They are losing personnel at an accelerating rate every month. They reportedly can only recruit about 17,000, but they're losing between deaths, injuries or wounds from battle or desertions, at least 60,000 a month.
Wow.
So, that means they've got at a minimum a net loss of 43,000 soldiers every month. That's unsustainable.
I'm going through a piece written by our mutual friend Pepe Escobar. He starts the piece by saying he agrees 100% with Larry Johnson's analysis. So I'm assuming you're on the same page, but some of this stuff is crazy. A U.S. mediated Russia-NATO dialogue will be launched to resolve security issues and promote cooperation. Why would Russia engage in a dialogue with NATO over Ukraine mediated by Trump?
Yeah. No, this is what we have here. To quote the old Cool Hand Luke movie, what we have here is a failure to communicate. So on the part of the West, the NATO, they've still got some fundamental assumptions about Russia. They assume that Vladimir Putin is desperate to end the war, that the economy in Russia is so bad that they're under pressure. They'll take any deal to stop the pain. That they've lost so many soldiers that it's unsustainable, that they want out, and that the political pressure against Putin is mounting. Now, none of that is true. It's absolutely not true. All of it is fundamentally false. But those are the assumptions of the West, and therefore, the proposals that have come out in these various versions of the peace plan or the framework for discussion carry with it that assumption that Russia is somehow under pressure and the West is inability to apply pressure to end the war. And Russia's standpoint is just the opposite. They're saying, look, we'll be happy to have a negotiated settlement, provided that it meets our demands. And their fundamental demands are the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, period. And the demilitarization then goes to the extent of getting NATO to back the hell away and take down the weapons systems that are currently in place in Poland and Romania that could potentially carry a nuclear weapon or a nuclear warhead. And Russia said, listen, we're happy. We'll sit down. We'll talk. We'd prefer to talk rather than fight. But that's that's where we start from. There's no retreating from those goals. And now it's been added to it is the fact that the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia are now permanently part of the Russian Federation. Not just part, not just a sliver of territory. The entirety of each of those former Ukrainian oblasts is now permanently part of Russia. And Putin doesn't have the power to sit there and say, okay, let's make a deal. Yeah, I'll give you Zaporizhia and Kherson if you give me Donetsk and Luhansk. No, not going to happen. And yet, that's one of the other things, how the West approaches that, we'll freeze this in place. In fact, Kellogg supposedly was pushing a plan that there would be a ceasefire in place and where the Russians are stopped where they are in Donetsk. And then the West builds a wall. I mean, they're going to build a friggin' wall across this vast expanse of territory to separate the Ukrainians from the Russians.
You mean a literal wall like the Berlin Wall?
Yes.
No wonder Kellogg is gone. This is insane.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Somebody's got a brother-in-law in the concrete business who's going to, hoping to get the contract.
But look, Larry, there's other bizarre things in here. The frozen Russian assets. The U.S. gets to administer $100 billion. Now, Donald Trump's going to participate in this theft of Russian assets in European banks.
Yeah, that's got the Europeans upset because they thought that money was theirs. So, and then you've got the clearinghouse, Euroclear, that holds the money, saying, y'all can't do this because that's going to create some real economic problems for us here in Europe beyond what we already have. So, this is, we're witnessing, really, this is a repeat on a much grander scale of what transpired back in January, February of 2015. The Battle of Debaltseve, which is on the border of Luhansk and Donetsk, that was a significant defeat for the Ukrainian army at that time. It wasn't nearly as big as it was a few years later. And you had the Europeans intervene frantically. Francois Hollande and Angela Merkel of Germany. And then the United States sort of signed on the side. Belarus President Lukashenko hosted talks, and they signed Minsk II. And the purpose of Minsk II was, from the Russian standpoint, it was going to preserve the language and rights of the Russian speakers in Donetsk and Luhansk to live without being attacked. Well, we then learned, in December 2022, Merkel and Hollande both admit, yeah, it was a ruse. We were just trying to buy Ukraine time so it could reconstitute its army. That's all it was. And frankly, that's all this proposed peace deal is. It comes at a time that Russia is wiping the floor with the Ukrainian forces. They are moving and advancing. Russia's moving and advancing all along the line of contact. And you've got major pockets of Ukrainian troops that are trapped, particularly what's going on in Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk, neither of which up to this point were on Russia's list of we're going to keep this territory. But it's rapidly, Russia's going to be in a position, I think, as soon as the end of December, that they'll be at the Dnieper River and moving through Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia that quickly. And once they're there, particularly, they control the river. Or if they get across the river in Kherson, they will then take full control of the Dnieper River. And you control the Dnieper River, that means any product, any grain, anything shipping down from the upper part of Ukraine will be in Russian hands. It literally strangles the economy of Ukraine. So,
do you think that any of this is designed as sort of a deception to get our eyes off of Israel now bombing Lebanon and Trump about to invade Venezuela?
No, I don't think they're that clever. But it does sort of serve that purpose. You remember all the furor and all the attention that surrounded the Anchorage meeting, and
right.
A lot of heavy breathing back then, and then 3 or 4 days later, what meeting? I think that's going to be the result this week. The most likely scenario is that the United States, the Europeans, and Zelensky, they'll come up with a plan that they'll all sort of agree to. I don't see Trump walking away from Ukraine. He should, but I don't see it. So they'll come up with a plan, and they'll present it to Russia. And Russia, their initial reaction will be, "Oh, we'll take a look. Let us read it over." But then once they read it over, they're going to have to set a meeting, and Russia will negotiate each and every point in whatever the U.S. and the West presents. And I don't see the U.S. Or Ukraine agreeing to permit Russia to retain control of Zaporizhia and Kherson. But they're going to. Russia's not going to relent on that. Putin can't. It's not. let me put it this way. If Putin tried to cut such a deal, I think there would be a move to remove Putin from office.
Wow. Well, here's Putin himself yesterday in military garb on all of this. Chris, number 2.
I think it's clear to everyone that these people, sitting on golden pots, are hardly thinking about the fate of their country, the fate of ordinary Ukrainians, the officer corps, and especially the ordinary soldiers. It doesn't give it to them. But you and I have our own tasks, our own goals. The most important of these, of course, is achieving the goal of the special military operation and solving the problems set before us by our fatherland and the people of Russia. The Russian people are counting on you, hoping for the results the country needs. Let's get to work.
Now, that's a pretty significant statement, is it not?
Yeah.
In military garb to all of his senior generals, broadcast by the Russian foreign ministry around the world. That's a significant statement.
Yeah. Well, and it is customary when Putin goes to visit a military headquarters out in the field that he will wear a military uniform. So that's not unusual. But all I encourage people to do is, if you're having trouble hearing Putin, go to an audiologist, get a hearing test, buy the hearing aids, listen to what he's saying. He's not being clever. He's not using coded words. He's saying very, very clearly, Russia is going to achieve its objectives. It is happy to achieve those objectives diplomatically if possible. But if not, okay, they're going to do it militarily. Russia is under no pressure to end this thing quickly. And you know what? I think from their standpoint, if they continue to drag out the West, to force the West to keep pouring money into this black hole that is Ukraine, great. It's another way to weaken the West. There's nothing in this everything that's happened over the course of the last 47 months now we have seen every single NATO weapon system, every single one, the ones provided by the United States, Germany, France, they've been defeated or countered by Russia. There's not a single tactic that the West has been able to employ that has caused Russia to permanently lose territory. The early success they had, Ukraine did in September of 2022, was simply because Russia didn't have enough troops in the field to deal with the counteroffensive. But they do now. And there are now reports have emerged that the North Koreans are back. Why? Well, North Koreans get combat experience. This is much better than going to a field training where you're faking it. You're not firing real ammunition, and they're not having to deal with actual drones attacking you. So it's a way for North Korea to get actual combat experience. And Russia's happy to use them, but Russia on its own has still built up its ground forces to around 750,000. And if you recall, back in February of 2022, it was only 250,000. So they've tripled the size of the ground force, and now they're in a position where they're able to actually carry out these operations from north to south. And Ukraine does not have enough bodies to counter all that.
President Zelensky, of course, has a dilemma between ending this voluntarily and losing his job and maybe his life, or separating himself from his biggest patron to this point, the United States. Here he is expressing that dilemma. He also throws something else in here I hadn't thought about. It's November, a very cold winter coming to Ukraine. Chris, number 3.
Зараз один з найважчих моментів нашої історії.
This is one of the most difficult moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine is now at its most intense. Ukraine may now face a very difficult choice. either the loss of dignity, or the risk of losing a key partner, or 28 difficult points, or an extremely harsh winter. The most difficult and further risk are life without freedom, without dignity, without justice, and believing someone who has already attacked us twice.
Sounds to me like he's going to reject this, and probably in his own mind has rejected it already.
Yeah, I think he'll have a change of heart once the whole money issue gets put on the table. While he is under pressure from the neo-Nazis that are behind the power behind the throne in Ukraine, it's Uncle Sam, aka Uncle Sugar, that's providing all the financial lubrication to keep things going, and help pad his bank account. So I think he'll compromise to a point that the United States can have something to offer Russia, because this is a game. They want to be able to go out and blame Russia. See, those Russians, man, they refuse. They won't take a good deal. But notice how the tone and substance of what Zelensky's saying has changed. You go back a month ago, Russia's losing the war. Ukraine's winning. Russia's losing. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is the most difficult time in our history.
Very, very good point. We don't even hear, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, or Lindsey Graham anymore saying Russia's losing.
Yeah. Maybe even Jack Keane is finally starting to see the light.
Well, Jack gets compensated handsomely for what he says.
or buddy, Mr. Divine.
Wow.
Wow. Look, the reality is the reason that this peace plan gets advanced now, it's the same scenario that happened surrounding the defeat of the Ukrainians at Debaltseve back in January of 2022. It's a way for the West to try to use a peace process to buy Ukraine more time, to buy the West more time, so they can figure out how the hell do we beat these Russians. And the answer is you can't.
Who is the de facto Secretary of State of the United States? Is it Marco Rubio? Is it Steve Witkoff? Is it Jared Kushner?
No, I think it's Rubio. I think he has an enormous amount of influence, and he's one of the reasons we still stay engaged in this war. And
he does not want the war to end. He's from correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, or you see this differently. He's from the Victoria Nuland School. We'll use the war as a battering ram, as absurd as this is, with which to drive Vladimir Putin from office.
Yeah, I mean, in his mind, the Russians are still the Soviets who backed the Cubans, that kicked his family out of Cuba, and so he's frozen in the past. But he's not the only voice. I mean, you've got Pete Hegseth as well surrounding him. You got Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury. Trump could easily put an end to this today. You simply pull the plug on the money and the CIA personnel and the military supplies. Pull the plug, cut it off. But he won't do that. So he's like Hamlet, to be or not to be.
Now, Trump claims that the military supplies are being paid for by NATO. How can that be true? Where do those European countries have the money? Surely we're still spending what was put in the Joe Biden pipeline. It was a Republican Congress, and Biden signed it into law.
Yeah, no, they're taking the line, Wimpy from Popeye. They're going to gladly pay us Tuesday for some Patriot missiles today. So it's a paper transaction at this point. I don't think there's been actual money being moved from European accounts into U.S. accounts.
Is there a military gear still coming from the United States to Ukraine?
Nothing that's going to change the war on the ground. There may be able to send a few more ATACMs, maybe a few more Patriots. So what? It's the Russians are advancing at a scale and pace that Ukraine and NATO cannot match, and that's that reality is starting to sink in, and as it sinks in, they get more and more desperate. But at least we saw in that the comment you played by Zelensky, some of the delusional nonsense is slipping away. He's realizing, hey, we're in trouble. This ship is sinking.
When you and Pepe and I were able to interrogate Maria Zarakova last week, I was only there for half an hour. You were there for 2 hours.
Right.
She was being truthful when asked is there some sort of a behind the scenes background being negotiated, because this thing had not yet been revealed.
Right.
But wouldn't the FSB have known? Wouldn't somebody in the Russian hierarchy have known? Hey, this guy that went to Stanford that advises President Putin on financial matters and has become buddy with Witkoff, he's in Miami for 3 days.
Yeah, no, the intelligence side of the house in Russia probably had something. Yeah, they report this is what the West is working on. This is what they're cooking up. But there was never any formal presentation of it to the Russians. And in fact, Usharov, another advisor to Putin, it's sort of a counterweight to Kirill Dmitriev, the guy you were referencing. He just came out and said, we've not seen anything. We still haven't seen anything. There's not been any formal contacts. There are no plans about we're going to meet such and such date to start talking about this plan. He says, they're waiting to see what happens in Geneva. And the fact is, it's now 6 p.m. in Geneva. We've not seen any breaking news about some major breakthrough. So I think, you may still have a bit of a food fight going on between the Americans, the Europeans, and with the Europeans backing Zelensky all the way.
Our friend and colleague, Ian Proud, reports that the EU's counter proposal to Rubio keeps the door ajar for Ukraine to join NATO. But if anything is a non-starter, if anything is a misreading of the Russians, it's that.
Yeah. Well, Russia's under no pressure to reach a deal. That's the bottom line. It's like if you're trying to sell a car to somebody that doesn't want to buy a car, that's a tough sell. And in this case, the United States is trying to sell Russia something that is entirely outside of what Russia wants and needs. Russia is winning the battle on the ground, period. And there's nothing that NATO or Ukraine can do to change that situation. But they're going to try.
Right. Larry, thank you very much. We have a very short week. We probably won't get a Intel Community Roundtable in, but maybe Chris can put something together. But if I don't see you, have a great Thanksgiving to you and your family. And we'll certainly see you a week from today and maybe between now and Thursday.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye. Coming up at 4:00 this afternoon on all of this, why does the United States still
No, I don't know much about Thanksgiving. What I do know about it is I wouldn't be celebrating it, as it's asking God to bless and to give thanks to God for the wholesale theft of an entire subcontinent, which led ineluctably to the mass extermination of the people who were already living there, before supplementing the population with millions of black African slaves brought in chains across the Middle Passage. But it's an American thing. What I do know about Thanksgiving is it's on Thursday, and that is a tight deadline indeed that Donald Trump has given Volodymyr Zelensky, or appeared to give him. With Trump, you must cancel my last announcement. With Trump, it will depend upon who sat upon him last, like that famous sofa in Oscar Wilde's aphorism. The deadline of Thursday set complete panic in the ranks of the Zelensky gang in Kiev. After all, two of his closest allies and most important people in Kiev, in government circles, have literally fled to Israel. Where else are they going to flee? They're accused of being thieves. They have the right to go to Israel because they're Jewish, so they've gone and they're never coming back. And others are in other capitals and in other countries. And that's because of the massive corruption scandal, which our friend Larry Johnson, the former CIA analyst, estimates at a $45 billion theft, making it easily the greatest theft ever recorded in human history. 45 billion. I want you to concentrate on the word billion. Try this to help you concentrate. If you turn the clock back 1,000,000 minutes, you'd reach 2023. If you turn the clock back 1 billion minutes, you'd reach the Roman Empire. That's right. That's the difference between 1,000,000 and 1 billion. 2023 and the Roman Empire. Because people are so used to hearing the word billion, they have entirely lost, if they ever had, any sense of the gargantuan scale of $1 billion. So try $45 billion. That was funneled in by your government. If you're in the United States, in Britain or France or Germany or any European Union government, and many others outside of the European Union, your government funneled $45 billion that were stolen by Zelensky, his family, and his closest clique associates. No wonder he demanded from President Trump a clause in the Trump 28-point peace plan that granted amnesty to everyone involved in the war. Amnesty or not, Zelensky ain't going to get away with this level of theft. Someone, somewhere, is probably even now contemplating how they're going to hold him accountable, how they're going to recover $45 billion in grand larceny, how they're going to get it back, at least to Ukraine, if not to the other countries whose money it actually was. But I digress. The 28-point plan by Donald Trump, to be agreed by Thursday, is the basis for a peace agreement, no doubt. Kellogg, General Kellogg, the stooge of the regime in Kiev, has declared it so. Trump has declared it so. Vance, who's keenest of all, has declared it so. Rubio, who's not remotely keen, has declared it so. And most importantly, the Russian government, President Vladimir Putin, has also said that it is the basis for a settlement. So it could all be over by Thanksgiving, or at least be over by Christmas, or maybe the Orthodox Christmas, or I don't know, maybe Easter. But it should now be coming to an end, and could now be coming to an end. A conflict that has cost the lives of well over 1 million people, 1 million Ukrainians alone, the dispersal of 9 million Ukrainians who've left their country, are living near you, are living on you, and may never leave you, have been sent spilling around the Western world, looking for a place to avoid being drafted from. And who can blame them? One sees the pictures, the videos of the brutal press ganging of young men and very old men, and now also women, in Ukraine, drafted to go to the front, perchance to die within a week, to defend the robbing barons of the Kiev dictatorship, whose democratic legitimacy is gone with the wind. But the cost to Ukraine of this, which has of course been the major loser, is not just measurable in blood or even blood and treasure. It must be measurable in land. Every single day that a peaceful settlement of this conflict is delayed, the Russian armed forces are helping themselves to a bigger and bigger part of Ukraine. As my friend Che Bose always puts it, Ukraine will be smaller tomorrow than it was today. And that is true every single day. And now, major cities, Pavlovsk, the country towns, villages, cities, major infrastructure are either being destroyed or they are being taken. And Kupiansk, the town I told you about right at the beginning of the conflict, when I said who wants to send their son to die, to decide which side of a line Kupiansk will lie on when it has lain in 4 different countries in the last 100 years. Well, I can now tell you that Kupiansk will lie in Russia, and much else besides, if this peace deal isn't honored, isn't implemented, either by Thanksgiving or at least, one hopes, by Christmas. And so any sane person would have already concluded that now is the time to finish this thing by negotiation before more lives are lost, before more treasure is burned, before more land is lost, and, well, frankly, before the European economies in particular are simply no longer able to even make the promises that they are currently making but cannot keep. Well, that's what a sane person would think. But our leaders are not sane. Starmer ain't sane. Macron is roaming around Paris like Caligula. Merz, true to his great-grandfather and his service in the Nazi inner circle, Hitler's inner circle, yes, the Reich Chancellor in Berlin now is the grandson of one of Hitler's inner circle. You really couldn't make it up. If that patch of hair on the middle of his rather receding hairline were placed underneath his powerful nose, I think you'd get the picture very clearly. Merz, Macron, Starmer. What's the other fella in Finland? Stubbs. Stubbs. We've got a Rutte and we've got a Stubbs in this picture too. These people are not sane. These are not well men. They can't be, because they are watching their political fortunes disappear down the drain as fast as they are pouring their country's hard-earned and much-needed cash into. They formed an alternative plan. As you'd expect, their alternative plan is utterly ridiculous. I mean, so ridiculous, you'll laugh out loud. Trump's plan rules out NATO membership forever for Ukraine. The European leaders' counter plan is that Ukraine must be free to join NATO anytime it likes. Trump's plan says cut the Ukrainian armed forces to a figure 8 times greater than the armed forces of the United Kingdom. Bad enough. But the European leaders' plan is no cap on the Ukrainian armed forces at all. Trump's plan excludes foreign armies entering Ukraine. the European leaders demand to be allowed to send their sons at your expense indefinitely to be an occupation force in Ukraine. I could go on, but we've got expert guests that will go on and give us chapter and verse. But put it this way, the European peace plan is a war plan. If any line of it is incorporated, it will render null and void Putin's declaration that Trump's plan might be the basis for a settlement. So be sure that your leader's plan is for you to go on in fuel poverty, paying 4 times at least the bill for electricity and gas than you were before this conflict broke out in its current form almost 4 years ago. Be sure your leaders are planning to send your sons to a war for which side of a line Kupiansk will reside for the next 100 years. Be sure that your leaders intend for the large-scale theft of your resources to continue, for no justice to be visited on the thieves of the century. It is your leader's plan that a war will continue to rage in Europe, pregnant with the possibility of being the harbinger of World War III. That's your leader's peace plan. There they are on the screen behind me. They couldn't muster 20% approval between them. Between them, 10 and 9 is their current public approval rating, but they are spending your country's money and risking your people's blood and perpetual war in Europe. And we have, I've said this before, the now grotesquely bizarre situation that a right-wing Republican president of the United States is trying to stop a European war, while the milquetoast couldn't punch their way out of a wet paper bag social and Christian Democrats in Europe and in the United Kingdom who are demanding that the war must continue and that you must continue to pay for it. Who will win? I can't predict. Rubio just said he's met Ukraine. It was a great meeting, and he's going to change some of President Trump's plans accordingly. Whether President Trump knows that and approves it or not, I suppose we'll have to wait on Truth Social to discover. But anything that Rubio changes at the behest of the Ukrainians makes it far less likely that the Russians will accept it. And why should they? It's not the losers of a war who dictate the terms of its ending. It is the winners of a war who do so. And who, in their right mind, will now deny that Russia has won the war in Ukraine? I've only time to deal with a couple of other points. First one was what I said in the introduction. What a stroke of luck, or what a blunder, take your pick, when Elon Musk said he'd now publish the origin of Twitter accounts. Didn't last long, but my goodness, people are quick at the old screenshotting. Turns out the US government, Department of Homeland Security, has its Twitter account started in Israel and operated from Israel. What's that about? Turns out that Hate Not Hope, the campaign group that worked hard to get me out of the British Parliament, operates its Twitter account from the United States of America. Turns out, like that Talk Sport advert, you remember? You think you're talking to a buxom blonde beauty in the Ukraine and proposing marriage, but you're actually talking to a 20-stone boilermaker in Middlesbrough. Turns out that all these winsome, blonde, blue-eyed Israeli women soldiers that you may very well have been arguing with if you weren't lusting over are actually Nigerians and Indians. It turns out that almost all of the bots operated by Israel are operating from India and Nigeria. I don't know what it is about India and Nigeria that makes them so, well, conducive to a job scamming. I myself used to regularly get letters from a Nigerian prince. You know me, good man, he called himself. And if only I would send him my bank account details, he'd kindly deposit several £million for no reason in said account. Well, it turns out that Nigeria and India, I don't know what other economy is going on there, but my God, there's a whole lot of tweeting going on under false colors, false pretenses in both of those countries. I did have one other thing to say, but I've run out of time. Stay tuned.
Kofi, follow me.